All right, this is my solution to a four-wheel drive swap in a third gen 4Runner. So I have a third gen 4Runner. It was two-wheel drive. I converted it to four-wheel drive. One of the things that you run into when you do this swap is that this cross member that actually holds your transmission in the two-wheel drive truck sits about 6 inches behind where it should sit in the four-wheel drive trucks. The reason for that is in the two-wheel drive trucks, they use this bracket so it bolts into the cross member. And as you can see, it'll line up with where it should be. So traditionally what a lot of guys have done who have done this swap is they would cut the frame horns, move them up to the right place, and re-weld them. You know, you have to have some skills to do that. You have to have access to a welder. You're also cutting your frame. So it is a little bit of an involved process. The workaround a few people have come up with is to use a trail gear cross member. But to do that, the problem is you still have to cut your frame horns and then you have to drill through the frame. So it's still a pretty involved process. I'm really not a fan of doing either of those. So what I came up with is just my own mount. Now, what I was doing for a while when I originally did this swap is I just flipped this cross member over. When you can see there's a slant here. So when you flip it over, it's gonna give you some more clearance height-wise. And then I pop this on here. I added some shims in the rear to kind of tilt this forward. And that gave me enough height to clear the body with the transmission. And I drove it like that for a few, almost a year, put a few thousand miles on it, went on a couple road trips. I had no issues doing it that way. The only issue I ran into is when there was enough weight in the car that it compressed the body mounts, the transmission would still contact the body and I'd get a vibration. So that's really the only reason I'm switching from this to this, is because I was getting vibrations, and I wasn't a big fan of that. So what I did is I got myself a 1/2 inch plate of steel. This is 304 stainless steel. This is a 6 inch wide by 10 inch long plate. And as you can see, I just drilled some holes in it and bolted it in. So I have it bolted to the cross member here. This is going to line up with where the transmission sits, and I drilled it out. On the bottom, these are bolted into weld nuts, so they're not going to go anywhere. It's just a straight hole, so I had to add the washers. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The hardest part about this is, excuse me, there's traffic. Hardest part about this is I use stainless steel. If you're gonna do this, I would not recommend using stainless. I would use something like A36. Stainless steel, if you don't know, is really hard to drill through, especially if you're gonna drill something this big. This is a 2 inch hole. So it took me, a couple afternoons to get all these holes through. It was a painstaking process. I really wouldn't use stainless, but this is just what I had. So again, I'd use something other than this. I'd use A36. You should have no problem. And if you have a drill press or a plasma cutter, you're going to be just fine. So yeah, this is probably the easiest way to do this swap, because, you got a couple bucks in hardware. You got to get some longer bolts, some washers, and, a plate of steel like this is going to run you 40, 50 bucks. You can probably find these anywhere, probably for cheaper too. So yeah, this is a pretty easy way to do it. You don't have to weld, you don't have to cut anything. This is all bolt in. Just got to do a little bit of drilling and some measurements. So if you want to do a four-wheel drive swap on a third gen 4Runner, this is probably the easiest way to do it.